So we've given it at least three perspectives or three focus areas. Number one, it is what is the mindset, the strategic mindset of parenting in the 21st century. Now, the second focus will look at how do you set the stage as a parent to become successful in parenting. And then the final part is how do you program your child for success. So it is a pleasure, Brian, to be part of this session and to give my contribution. And I will encourage you all participate where it is necessary. And we just ride along.
Great, Bob. So here we are, and we shall be having some time for interaction and questions and answer at the end of it. But in between, we shall be interacting. But as Bob has said, he did not even introduce himself as the way I wanted him to say who he is, because I'll miss out on some details. But I guess as you saw the poster, is a high-level speaker invited to many forums to speak, and he's a strategist by excellence, and he just does his thing with passion and breed of zeal and commitment. And I'm sure he's going to give his best so that together we may grow into the kind of parents that God desires for us to be. So Bob, take it off from here.
I will request, Brian, that you've disabled the screen sharing. Kindly enable it.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'd forgotten about that. All right, there.
Okay, I'm going to share a PowerPoint. I hope it is visible to everyone. Brian, from your end, you can confirm?
Yes, I can confirm from my end it's visible.
Okay, these are the sections, as I said. Number one, we'll focus on how do you parent like a master strategist. As Brian introduced me, I'm a strategic management consultant. I give high-level strategy to corporates, and I'm also a life strategist. At the second section, we'll focus on the setting stage. How do you prepare yourself to succeed and thrive as a parent in the 21st century? And then the third part will focus on how do you program your child for success. So these are the three outlines. Hopefully we'll be able to with the picture in front of your screen. I'll give probably a 5-minute story. There used to be two friends, that is John and James. They are residents of US by nationality. And during one of their summers, as they were still in campus, they decided to travel to Calcutta, India. And when they went and arrived to Calcutta, India, immediately after coming out of the airport, on the left side of your screen, that is the image that was visible in the environment. There was a lot of people sleeping on the street, on the sideline. That is homeless people. And there was two different reactions between the two. Immediately, John saw what was visible within the environment. His first reaction and instant reaction was to make a determination that they go back home because he felt threatened by what he was seeing from the environment, what was visible. And in the process of trying to convince John that they should leave and travel back, John was the one who was worried and wanted to travel back. James was just silent and was non-responsive for a period of time. And eventually, he agreed to travel back with John. Now, so after traveling and arriving back in US, they both went back to campus. And John proceeded with his master's, completed his education, went and got married, and started a family. In the process, he took some mortgage out on some property, paid loans. So his life was a normal life, I can put it in quotes. But upon arrival in US, James did something very different. He took about 2 to 3 months of conceptualization, and he came up with something, an idea, and he decided to travel back to India, the same place, which is Calcutta. So fast forward, while John was going through the normal life cycle of raising a family, trying to manage bills and everything, underemployment, James, on the other hand, became a billionaire. And this is based on the two pictures and the images that are in front of your screen. Now, maybe this is the first question I can ask to the audience. Between the two images, the one which is on the left and the one which is on the right, and I'll start with you, Brian. If you are John, or if you are James, where would you feel most comfortable to operate in?
I'll
Right.
feel comfortable to operate in the city, man, where there's a lot of life and everything's okay, man.
We can ask the same question to the audience, maybe 2-3 people. What is their perspective?
Rita says in the city. Anyone else want
Anyone
to
else?
question? Raise your hand and just volunteer. Just feel free. Definitely city from Bula. She says definitely in the city. Yes, we can use the chat to communicate. She says definitely in the city, Bob. I mean, it's more like a rhetoric question.
Okay, now I will ask the second question. So the first one, our immediate reaction, we will all want to operate in the city. Now the second question, how did James become a billionaire?
Okay, someone to answer that. How did James become a billionaire? Geoffrey Maweje,
the answer lies in front of what is in your screen.
Aha, the answer is right there. This is a big hint.
How do you?
No.
The speaker is not working. Please check your phone.
The speaker is working. We can hear you, Bernice. All right, who wants to answer that? How did he become a billionaire? You have been told the answer is right in front of your screen.
No.
I work.
Geoffrey said, Bernice, we can hear you.
I'll give you a hint. He went into the manufacturing business.
They said he went into manufacturing business. Johnny says he tried to solve the problem he encountered to help the homeless.
Okay.
Benjamin says hotels, I think. Mpiri says he took a different path from most people. He saw an opportunity after the visit to India. Rita says by helping the people in the first picture, providing jobs for the homeless.
Yes.
Oleta says strategy.
It is actually very specific. I agree with strategy, definitely, but it's very specific. Just by observing the two images, what are you seeing that can be manufactured?
Someone says shoes. Rita says clothes. Tony says shoes. Mfiri says he made shoes. Rita says clothes. Martha says shoes.
Okay, the ones who said shoes, that's the answer.
Right.
But now I take you back to the essence of the story. This, in strategy, the key concept which I'm trying to highlight from that story is the concept of perspective. There are two people who are looking at the same thing in the same environment, but they are drawing different conclusions. One person perceived Calcutta as a threat, and that one immediately decided to go back to where he was comfortable, that is the city. But another person who came from the city, that is James, looked at the same environment, but his perspective was different. He saw something that was common amongst the people who are in his frame of reference. And number one, they were all struggling, but at the same time, he saw a problem. They were all lying without shoes. So what he decided to do is to go back, instead of operating within the conventional scope of going to education, studying, getting a good job, he decided to do his research. What is the population of India? It is in billions. And he saw in a city whereby there's a larger percentage of the population which is disenfranchised and marginalized. And he asked himself a very simple question. What if I was able to produce shoes that are below $1 and introduce them to that market? And this is based on a true story. And that's exactly what he did. He did his research. He raised some form of capital, created a prototype of the product, and introduced it in India. Fast forward, while John was still struggling in the traditional cycle of living, James, in a year or two, he had already become a billionaire. The whole essence of what I'm trying to show you is parenting also operates on the same premise. It's about perspective. If you are going to become a successful parent within the 21st century, the question is, what perspective are you holding as a parent first? And what perspective will it be inculcated and transferred to your child? Will it be a Jones or a James perspective? So the question down there is, what is strategy? A strategy, by simple definition, means it is a high-level plan that is designed to achieve one or more goals under conditions of uncertainty. There are three keywords. There's the word plan, there's the word goals, there's the word uncertainty. Now, if I replace the question, what is strategy, and I use the same answer in the same question, I replace it and I reframe it. What is parenting? According to me, parenting is a high-level plan by which you're trying to achieve one or more objective, which is to position your child to succeed in the future under conditions of uncertainty. Uncertainty means what? The world that we live in. So anytime you're trying to formulate a plan to achieve a goal at a future point of time under conditions of uncertainty, that is what we call a strategy. Now, one of the characteristics of a strategy, the most effective characteristic of a strategy, is based again on the same image. A powerful strategy will always be influenced by the environment in which we use the word a system is operating in. A powerful strategy is one which is influenced and emanating from the environment by which a system is operating in. But the success of that strategy depends on the word which I've already introduced, perception. Now, in this context, we call it multifacetedness. In other words, many faces. What does that mean? What shape and character an environment assumes depends on the perception of the observer. So the shape and the character which Calcutta as a city assumed depended on the perception of John and the perception of James. According to John, that shape was a threat. This is a filthy city. I'm from the US. There's probability I might even get sick. I need to go back to the city where I'm comfortable. Now, according to James, the shape and character which Calcutta assumed, in his perception, it was an opportunity. Once he identified an opportunity, taking the definition of strategy, he went and formulated a high-level plan to achieve a goal based on the perception of what he saw, but under the conditions of uncertainty. So to understand simply what a strategy is, it's a plan that is influenced by the environment, and that plan is created to achieve a specific outcome, and usually under conditions of uncertainty. Now, to introduce even the concept of strategy further, a strategy can be also explained in the context of 5 things. Number one is a plan. It's in the present with the future in mind. And as a parent, there are continuous decisions that you need to make in the present, but the question is, how will they impact your child in the future? So every parent needs a plan. Number 2, a strategy is a ploy. The word ploy means what? It is a continuous maneuvering to outwit an enemy, a competitor, or an opponent. So in this case, anything that can impact your child negatively or anything that can impact the success of a child in the future is an enemy. So that whole process of continually and continuously trying to evaluate what are the factors that can limit or inhibit his success, and you're trying to indemnify the child by adjusting and readjusting, that is what we call plowing. A strategy is also what we call a perspective. It is the shape and the character, how you are interpreting the environment around you. And then a strategy is what we call a position. It is continuous juxtapose. You do not become rigid. So how is this important? I have given a concept, which is in your screen right now, just to explain how do you parent like a master strategist. Number one, as a parent, it is your responsibility to look at the environment, which is the world as it is right now. And the world is characterized by three things. Number one, it is globally competitive. It is one big global village. Number two, there's what we call liberalization of economies. And liberalization means what? Anyone can compete and enter into any space. No one is limited. If someone wanted to leave US and come and operate in our environment, it is open. So there's that liberalization of the economies, there's globalization, and there's the whole concept of digital transformation, which is everything is going digital. Technology is forming and shaping a fundamental component of everything that we are doing. Now, what does this bring? We call it the 3 C's. It brings the concept of complexity. Complexity means what? The world is changing rapidly. The moment you try or you think you figured it out, it shifts on you. Up until March 2020, we all thought we understood the world until COVID hit. Now, COVID made some industries become obsolete. So it means anytime you've connected multiple components or multiple systems through technology in a global environment, there are many variables that are operating at the same time. And each of these variables, anytime they come into collusion, they produce new set of influences. And this new set of influences, they continue to improve and adapt. So at where we are right now, we cannot be successful in trying to convince ourselves that we figured how the world is. A simple example is even the COVID virus itself. You've seen the number of variants that are coming out because it is the job of a virus to mutate and adapt. Anytime there's some form of remedy in terms of medicine, the virus needs to adapt. So the world is operating almost in the same context. Everything is changing at a very rapid pace, and there are many multiple variables that are competing and creating new set of influences, which is triggering complexity. And at the same time, because the world is so digitally connected, competition has gone global. So what does that mean? When it comes to parenting, you have to take the factors of strategy into your parenting system. And that is why the concept is, how do you parent like a master strategist? A simple model I've put in front of you, we call it the evolution of strategy. But in this case, the evolution of parenting strategy. I will try to explain it very fast because of time. And this is what it means. As a parent, there's a specific aspiration or desire you have for your child. And that is what we call intended strategy. Intended from the word intention. We all start our journey with a specific predetermined hope and desire of a projected outcome in the future. So that is what we call intended strategy. This is the first strategy you create when you are trying to anticipate, when you're trying to position yourself for a particular outcome in the future. Now, intended strategy is created using set of, in other words, when you're creating an intended strategy, it is influenced by the environment and what is available, set of information that is visible. Now, using the information we have, I'll give you an example in terms of your financial status. You can look at how much, you can easily tell what is your net worth, what is your value in terms of monetary terms. That is the information that is available in front of you. Now, intended strategy will put you on a path, which is the pink line in front of you. And we call that the deliberate strategy. Anytime you activate an intended strategy, it becomes deliberate. We call that a deliberate path, the pink line. But I take you back to what I've explained. The world is shifting at a very fast pace. So anytime you've created a strategy that is intended and it is influenced by what is visible from the environment, when the environment shifts, then that information can also shift and become obsolete. So what does that mean? An intended strategy, even before it is placed in, even before it is activated or implemented, can become obsolete. But how do you handle that process? In the process or in the journey of implementing an intended strategy and traveling on that pink line, it is your responsibility as a parent to continuously look at the environment, and you are studying the information that influenced your first strategy, which is the intended. If that information remains consistent, you stick to the path that is pink. But if that information, the environment shifts on you, it is your responsibility to take part of your original assumption that influenced the intended strategy that has been made obsolete, and you create what we call a discarded strategy. That means what? You drop the set of assumptions you had about the path which your child should be on. You drop those set of assumptions. But where you drop, it means there's a new set of information that has come in based on the evolution from the environment. And that is called what we call emerging strategy. Emerging strategy is the new strategy that is created to replenish the deliberate path and to replenish the intended strategy. Now, this we call strategic rejuvenation. And that's why I told you, how do you build the mindset of a strategist when it comes to parenting? All parents have a set of predefined desire, goal, outcome for their children. And that is what we call a deliberate path or an intended strategy. But that outcome is based on information that is available to you. But you see, that information can become obsolete because it's predominantly influenced by what is happening in the environment. I'll give you a very example. A parent can define the path of their children based on their, for example, employment stability. Let's say if it is a parent who has a contract, that is pre-COVID, before COVID. And let's say the parent was making about 1 million shillings. And they've decided, you know what, I'm going to put my child, for example, in an international school. And this decision is based on information that is available in the environment, which is what? I am employed in a good position and I have a contract. Now the environment shifts, COVID comes, and the stability and security of tenure is no longer there. So what do you do as a parent? You need to discard part of the original thinking based on the new set of information. Now, when you discard, you will now take new decisions based on the new set of information that has come in. So that process of discarding and emerging, that you rejuvenate your intended path, we call that process strategic evolution. Now, the final strategy that will get someone where they hoped to arrive, we call that a realized strategy. We call that a realized strategy. It's missing there. Where the person is standing with a black suit, we call that a realized strategy. So what am I trying to tell you? The intended strategy will never get you to the outcome as it is. Part of it will have to be discarded, but where it is discarded, it will have to be replaced by emergent. But at the same time, it's your job to continuously rejuvenate the deliberate path. But so the final strategy that will get you to the outcome, we call it a real. In the process of discarding and emerging strategy, there's something there called a serendipity strategy. A serendipity strategy is one that the word itself means it is an accidental strategy. This is a strategy that was not foreseeable from the beginning. It was never thought of. It was never forecasted or anticipated. but it is something that showed itself along the way as you are trying to rejuvenate your deliberate path. But the most important thing about a serendipity strategy is usually bigger and better than the original thought. So the question is, in your process of creating an intention, which is an intended strategy for your child, and placing that child on a deliberate path, are you discarding part of the original thinking based on new set of information? Are you introducing, which is imagined, new set of strategic influence on the deliberate path based on new thinking? And in the process, are you trying to identify what could be the serendipity? Now, Brian, everything that I'm teaching here, there's usually a simple rule when I'm coaching, specifically when I'm mentoring young people. I tell them the only thing you need to do is find someone who has achieved the results that you wish to achieve, and then go ask him or her a very simple question. If you are to come back to my age, knowing what you know, taking everything that you know, and you come back to my age, what will you do differently? It is that kind of thinking that I've used to influence this presentation. I have placed myself in that position where, taking into context everything that I know right now about life and my experience, if I was to go back to 20 years or 19 years, and I'm lucky to have a nephew who is at that age, who I'm mentoring currently, and I am taking the same set of information here, my life as it is right now, it is not based on an intended path my parent had for me. It is not based on anything that was intended or originally planned for. I was in a university for 10 years abroad, and I never lost any year. I did about 3 master's degrees. I went for my doctoral, but I can tell you for a fact, my greatest level of success, including what I'm teaching you right now and what I do with my life, has no relationship with any path that was placed intentionally. But by luck, and I can't call it luck, by continuous implementation of what I know, by continuous exposing myself to knowledge, I was able to identify the serendipity strategy for myself. So what I advise everyone, and including my own nephew, I tell him, listen, as you are going to campus, understand whatever you're pursuing, which is the bachelor's or this course in human resource management, that is your intended strategy. But that intended strategy is based on a set of information that is influencing that path. But I want you to be deliberate in continuously evaluating the changes that are taking place in your environment and understanding where to drop that and where to introduce. But where you will arrive is not based on what is intended, but what will be realized. But in between, I want you to understand where your serendipity will lie. So this is, we will deliberate this but this is just one of the ways to think strategically as a parent. So serendipity strategy, I'll give you an example. A serendipity strategy is what we call an accidental happening. It is something that happens by accident. I'll use a very funny context to explain the concept of serendipity. There is a company that originally its deliberate intended strategy, they studied the environment and they realized in US there's a larger percentage of senior population, part of the senior population that was experiencing hypertension. Hypertension was a major problem. So they intentionally created an intended strategy of coming up with a drug that will cure hypertension. In the process of coming up with the prototype drug, they came up with the first model and they got a cloud they are going to test the drug on. But in the process of testing the drug, a new set of information was coming along. Instead of the drug addressing the hypertension issue, there were a new set of reactions that were becoming visible. And the company was trying to figure out where they were going wrong. But you see, the new set of reaction that was being projected in the testing phase of the drug became even bigger in terms of a potential drug to address another challenge. And they discarded completely the original intention. And they created a new emergent strategy, which is what? To change the intention, instead of focusing on hypertension, whatever the drug reactions it was creating, they decided to package it for that particular purpose. The company is Pfizer. Now, the drug which we are talking about is Viagra. Viagra as a drug was not intentionally created based on what it does. Viagra as a drug was discovered accidentally while trying to test a drug for hypertension. So Viagra came out of serendipity. When it was patented based on the impact it was creating, the company ended up having a bigger product than what was originally designed. So it is your parenting mindset that will influence where your child arrives in terms of realized strategy. But most of the challenge comes in when the parent is rigid in thinking and sticks to a particular deliberate path without being open enough to see if there's opportunity to discard and emerge, and if there's any underlying serendipity. So another simple model which you can use to evaluate your child strategically, or to evaluate your parenting process strategically, is what we call the palette. Now, this model is a bit complicated, but I will try to explain it in a few, quickly. The model is based on 3 factors. First of all, the underlying premise of this model is there is no one particular strategy that will overarch everything about your child or your parenting process. This model communicates that it is your job to continuously evaluate the interrelationship between yourself as a system, your child, and the environment, and try to figure out at what position do you lie based on what I will explain in front of you, and how to effectively adapt your strategy to match that particular position. So there are 3 variables that we use when it comes to evaluating the strategic mindset. Now, the first variable is the concept of malleability. Malleability is simply where you are asking yourself, whatever is happening around me, can I change it? Can I change it? Am I in a position to change it or not? That is what malleability means. The second variable is unpredictability. Unpredictability means, can I see it? Am I in a position to focus or anticipate it? Can I see it? And then the third variable is what we call harshness. What is the level of harshness that I'm experiencing? So why is this model relevant, and why is it applicable to parenting? Because the reality is this: your child in the future will land at either one of those positions that are in front of you. So there are 5 positions when it comes to strategic evaluation using this model. And these positions are dependent on your ability to influence the variables of predictability, which is how powerful how strong are you in anticipating and looking at the environment and trying to focus the probable outcome. The second variable is malleability, which means what? How strong are you to try and influence or change the set of outcomes, or to try and shape the set of outcomes? Now, the 4 resulting outcomes which are at the front, the classical environment means it is a position where you can see, that is, it is predictable, the environment, at a certain point, you will not be able to change it. In other words, there is predictability, but there's lack of malleability. A classical environment is the combination of the 2, is you can see, but you cannot change it. Now, the second is adaptive environment, which means you can't see what is going to happen, and you cannot change it. So that is what we call the adaptive environment. The third environment is called shaping environment. A shaping environment means even if you cannot see it, you are in a stronger position to influence change. And then the last, which is the superior position, is what we call a visionary position. A visionary position is where you can both see what is going to happen, or you can anticipate with precision, and you can influence the outcome of what is going to happen. And then at the back further end completely, which is even off the actual environment, that's a totally different environment on its own. It's called the renewable environment. A renewable environment is one which the condition is very harsh. So now I'm asking yourself as parents, what is the best position for your child to be in the future? Now, right now, when the children are under your care, you can see what is happening with them. You can see what is happening because they are under your care. But we have to remember a time will come in the future where you will not be in a position to change what is happening to them. So in that position where as a parent, you can see what is happening, but you will not be able to change in the future what is happening to them, is called a classical environment. Now, if you fail to manage the classical environment well, the child can fall into the adaptive environment. And the adaptive environment means what? The child will find himself in a situation whereby they cannot see what is coming, and they will not be in a position to change what is happening. Now, if that is not mitigated, automatically failure to address the classical and the adaptive environment, failure to address the classical environment will relegate someone to the adaptive environment. And if the adaptive environment is not successfully mitigated, they will fall at the back, which is in the renewable environment. And the renewable environment means everything is harsh. And when you say everything is harsh, means what? It is beyond their control. They are at the mercy of circumstances that is happening around them. But you see, alternatively, there's another route. A classical environment is whereby the child is under your care because right now you are present in their lives and you can influence most of their decisions. If you manage the classical environment well, instead of the child being relegated to the adaptive environment, they will jump into the shaping environment. And in the shaping environment means what? You cannot see what is going to happen you cannot see what is going to happen in the future, but you are doing everything as a parent to position your child to have the right tools to change and face anything that comes their way. In other words, you are giving them the tools to build resilience. What is resilience? Resilience is the art of being in a position whereby even if you fall, you can rise and address what is happening. So the shaping environment is whereby I might not be able to see what is going to happen, but I'm positioning him and I'm strengthening him and I'm giving him all the tools he needs so that he can shape and he can adapt even when I'm not there, when you're not there. And the last environment, which we call it visionary, when the child has been empowered at the shaping phase, they will fall into the visionary phase. The visionary phase means what? They are in a position to focus and anticipate what is going to happen on their own. And at the same time, they are malleable enough to change and address and build themselves to adapt to anything that comes their way. So the highest and the best position for your child to be in is a visionary. But for that to happen, they need to be empowered to start shaping. And to fall into the shaping environment depends on how you're managing the classical environment, which is under your care. So a classical environment is what we call stability. The environment is stable. In other words, when a child is under the care of the parent, the environment is stable because the parent is there predominantly. We don't live in a perfect world, but predominantly there is some form of stability. Now, an adaptive environment is one that is volatile, unpredictable, and rapidly changing. So where the only option is experimentation. What the only option someone is left with when in an adaptive environment is to react. There's no room for responding. There's a difference between responding and reacting. In a classical environment, you are in a position to help the child respond. But when they fall into an adaptive environment, they've lost the power of responding. Now they have to react. A shaping environment is one which is unpredictable, but the system, which is the child, has enough tools to start and orchestrate what is going to happen. They have the power to shape what is happening. And then a visionary environment is one which is open for disruption. It is open for innovation. So depending on the type of decisions you're making as a parent will determine where your child is falling in. So these are the fundamental rules. In a classical environment, the rule is this: go as big as you can. And by going big means what? Invest in empowering the child. Mentally, physically, psychologically, whatever form of investment to empower and position the child. There are different tactics, but we cannot exhaust in this session. We only have very limited time. So in a classical environment, the rule is this: go as big as you can. Now, if you fail to go big, the child will fall into an adaptive environment. Now, the adaptive environment is, the rule is be as fast as you can. And fast with an F-A-S-T, be fast. In other words, get out of that environment very fast. And then the shaping environment, be an orchestrator. Orchestrator means what? Try to create using collaborations. When you are shaping, in a shaping environment, the demand is you create something, but in the process of creating, look for what we call points of leveraging. Look at points of leveraging where you can. The word leveraging means what? It is adapting to extra energy so that you can exert a new force. When you're leveraging, you are using new energy or you're getting rejuvenated from a point of which is external. So, but it is maximizing your ability to produce more output. So in a shaping environment, the rule is this: collaborate. And the last part, which is visionary, is be fast, F-I-R-S-T. So in adaptive is be fast, F-A-S-T, but in a visionary environment, be fast. So the world right now as we are living depends on the decisions that we are taking will determine where you are. In a renewable environment, there's only one option. It's called be viable. By being viable means what? The resources are constrained, just try to be viable. And that is a very hopeless position. So this is just something you need to ask yourself as a parent: where is your child positioned? In the current trajectory of decision-making and strategies that you're making in their lives, based on your strategic perspective, where do you think they are positioned? Where do you think they will fall into the future? Remember, we create strategies so that we can take care of the future in the present. We don't create strategy. We create strategy so that we can try to bring the future in the present. So when you take this kind of modeling and you try to expound on it independently and let it influence your parenting style so that you are continuously evaluating, taking the other model I've taught you, you are on a deliberate path, but you are continuously discarding and emerging, trying to ensure that either if a serendipity occurs, well and good, but if it doesn't occur, you are rejuvenating your parenting strategy so that your child is falling on a shaping environment, eventually to fall in a visionary environment. So this is just strategic thinking that can influence. So if you look at the bottom bullet point, you have to be as big as you can in a classical environment. You have to be fast in an adaptive environment. You have to be fast in a visionary environment. You have to be the orchestrator in a shaping environment, but avoid all possible, in any possible way, avoid a child finding themselves in a situation they have to be viable. That's a very difficult space to be in. So the final model I'll introduce before I hand it to Brian for questions and maybe point of conversations and discussions. There's what we call, as a parent, you also need to understand what we call systems thinking. for you to become a 21st century parent, you need to understand the concept of systems thinking. Anything that has different parts that are combined to function as a single thing is called a system. When you take many variables and you combine them and they become one thing, it's a system, including human beings. If you look at yourself, you are what we call a primary system. A primary system is the one that all the parts have already been integrated. When it comes to systems thinking, every primary system is made up of components. So in systems thinking is the type of thinking whereby it's a perspective you're using to try and understand the primary system in taking into context the parts that are shaping it. Now, the rule is this, which when I'm coaching even some parents and I'm coaching my clients, I tell them is this. The rule about systems, every result and reality that a system is experiencing will always be dependent on the conditioning of the system from within. So whatever the system is experiencing on the outside is dependent on how the system is conditioned from within. Now, all of us here, we are all adults. Now, by the time we hit 35 years of age, we are a product of systems that have been conditioned within us during the period of our lives. Now, from the age of 0 to the age of 7, there's a rule which states that the child is coded genetically, but they are programmed environmentally. So the children will carry the genetic coding of the parent. That is DNA and everything. But now the type of adult the child becomes will depend on the type of environmental programming the child was inculcated in during their process of growth. Now, between the age of 0 to 7, the child is a hardware without a software. What does that mean? We are born as a hardware, but by the nature of being human, we are not born with logic to evaluate which type of software is being programmed within us or which type of software is being downloaded. So how does the child get the first set of programs or softwares? Between the age of 0 to 7, the child gets the program in 2 ways. Experience, that is a set of circumstances or activities which are taking place around the child that triggers the highest level of emotions in them. That is the first set of programming from experientially. And from that experience, it creates some form of cognitive bias or cognitive thinking. Now, the second set of programming, which is the most powerful between the age of 0 to 7, is observation. Whatever the child is exposed to on a continuous and repetitive basis, they automatically absorb it. So between the age of 0 to 7, there is that involuntary absorption and programming that takes place that the child cannot even influence or make a determination or try to differentiate what is right, what is wrong. It simply comes in by the nature. I usually use a very simple concept. We are a sponge in water, we absorb. Now, after the age of 0 to 7 is where logic starts kicking in. And that is where the child can start getting other forms of programming, which is verbal programming, instructions from the parent, instructions from the peers, instructions from the teachers. That is the second set of programming. But what does this programming do? This programming shapes and forms our personality. And our personality simply means how we think, how we act, and how we feel as adults is equivalent to the type of programming that we've gone through from the time we were born. Now, the world where we are living in, part of the main factor that influences our success is who we are. Now, our personality also shapes what we call our frame of reference about life, the model we have and how we view life. So this will address, if we have time, at the third section of this session. But in this case, I want to show you a child is a system that is born without a software and then adopts the software. So when you look at a primary system and you look at the results and the realities that are coming out from that system, will tell you the conditioning of the programming process, which I've just explained, that the child went through. So one of the simplest models you can use is what we call the iceberg model of systems. Now, part of systems thinking is what? Diving deep. Looking at whatever observation is available, you learn how to dive deep to influence the hidden part. So in iceberg model, we use the concept of the iceberg, which is 10% is visible at the top, but there's whatever is visible, there's a 90% that is lying below. So when you see an iceberg, the top is just the tip. But usually the equation is about the ratio of 10. That is 10% is at the top, 90% is underlying within. Now, your child is what we call the current system. And by the current system, that means what is visible in front of you. Your child is the current system. That is what is visible in front of you. Now, this current system, in the iceberg model, the part that is visible, we call it events. There are specific events that are happening. Every form of event that is happening with your child is visible to you. And that is the part of the iceberg that is outside at the top. But what you need to understand, when it comes to events, there are those that will disappear, but there are those that will maintain certain set of consistency. The events that maintain certain set of consistencies, they transform into what we call trends and patterns. So events and trends and patterns are usually visible. And that is part of the iceberg that is usually at the top. So when it comes to your child, that is the current system. If you look at the events that are happening around that child, but more importantly, you identify the ones that are maintaining consistency, that are forming patterns, will communicate to you as a parent what type of conditioning the child is having within. Now, when you talk about conditioning, conditioning means two things. It means the systems and structures that are within that child, and it means the mental models that the child is using as a frame of reference to influence their behavior. So behavior is outward. When events are happening and patterns are being exhibited, usually they come out in form of behavior. Now, the simple analogy is a printer. The type of printout that comes out will depend on the coding and the command that went in. So every behavior a child is exhibiting that forms part of their events, patterns, and trends on the outside are equivalent to the structures and the systems within the child and the mental models the child is having. So when you understand this concept of systems thinking, what does it mean? You can use the basis of what is visible in terms of events, patterns, and trends to anticipate, to understand the current system on your screen, but using what is observable with the current system, you can anticipate what system is emerging in the future. Emerging system is the one that will be in the future. So using simple tool like systems thinking to understand what just happened, that is the event, and which events are maintaining consistency and happening over a period of time, that is the pattern. Every event and pattern has a specific structure that is holding it in place. And that structure is influenced by a particular mental model. So if you want to impact the outer, which is the without, you have to dive. So parenting for the future is building your skill in systems thinking. That is one of the most powerful skills. even at a personal level. The type of results I'm producing at an individual, the type of experience and reality I'm having in my life is dependent on the conditioning of the system. Now, the danger is this. As we grow older, remember the 0 to 7 years, there are certain set of programming and softwares that went within, even when we didn't have any option or ability to influence them, that form who we are as an adult. It could be an experience that was very traumatic, or it could be any set of experience that was supported by high-level emotion. I am sure all of us can agree to this. There are things that happened to us when we were young. It could be even being beaten when we were in school. But that thing infuriated, it made you angry, as an example. Or that thing was supported by a high-level emotion that to date, when you get a trigger that reminds you, you almost like feel that experience. It's a deja vu moment. The experience is replaying itself. The simple reason is, anytime a system has information, and that information is supported by a powerful feeling, it creates what we call memory. So information that is supported by a feeling, it becomes memory. Anytime a memory is created, it moves from the logic mind and shifts, and it becomes part of our mental models. So as parents, you have to be careful what type of information is going to your child and what feelings are emanating that are supporting that information. Are they empowering or are they disruptive? But systems thinking generally, in just simplicity, is a way on how to break the primary system into parts and trying to understand the results, that is the events, the patterns and the trends that are being emanated, what state of conditioning is influencing them, instead of in the sense of structures and mental models. If whatever is visible is not satisfactory, if you go after what is visible, it's like painting over an ice cube. You dive deep, and deep. There are techniques. When you are doing the full program, there are techniques on how you study the structures and how you shape the structures and the models. So when it comes to events, react to them. When it comes to patterns, anticipate them. When it comes to structures, design them. And when it comes to mental models, frame them. Be part of the framing process. We cannot exhaust this in this session. So I think, Brian, I'll hand it back to you. I don't know if you have time. Any questions or anything up to there?
Hey, Bob. I didn't see you taking a sip of water. I was taking several here and the information was just flowing and being absorbed like a sponge. I have 3 questions, but I'm sure there must be some reaction from the people here if they have any questions. Bula is asking, is the programming between age 0 to 7 years reversible?
What you need to understand, any form of programming that we have is created by repetition. And for that programming to be reversed, it has to be done again through a repetitive process. Now, the type of programming that we have usually shapes our habits. They usually form part of our habits. And there's a rule of habits. You cannot remove a habit, but you can replace a habit by creating a new habit that is superior to take over where the old habit was. So the process can be reversed through repetition. The process can also be reversed by what we are doing right now. When you develop clarity, when you start getting information of the set of what happens for us to get that programming in the first place, when you start doing some of these courses and exposing yourself to some of this information, so it can be reversed. I personally have reversed a lot of the things that I felt were inhibiting myself from going forward.
All right, Madam Bula, I hope that is satisfactory. Any other question from anybody else? I'm sure you must be having questions, or maybe any comment? Yes, it is. Thanks, Martha. Msenze Charity, all the way from Uganda, she's saying, please clarify the programming of teenagers and how can we reverse it?
As I said, the programming starts at the age of 0 to 7, which is by default. It's like placing a sponge next to water. And at that stage, whatever the child is experiencing that triggers high-level emotion in them becomes automated in them in form of memory. That is an information which was supported by a feeling. Now, after the age of 7, the child now activates what we call the conscious mind. The conscious mind kicks in. You see, when the child is born, usually the child is operating from a subconscious level. And what does that mean? The mind is responsible to just keeping them alive. And that is why there's a subconscious part of us, which is responsible to make sure that our heart beats, the blood is flowing, all these biological processes are happening, but we do not even realize them happening. Our cells are dying and they're being reproduced. That's the subconscious part of us. But you see, if you take a child as an example, and you throw a snake in the crib, and it's a toddler, Brian, will the child run away?
No way. My own brother was once found playing with a snake, and I was the first one to take off. I didn't go to rescue the kid. I mean, he wouldn't run away.
But you take the same child at the age of 10 or 11 and you throw a snake next to them, will they run away?
Of course. Fast, F-A-S-T.
What is the distinction between the two? The distinction between the two, toddler phase, the child did not have a logic mind. Whatever was exposed to the child became acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
But as the child are growing older, whatever is being exposed to them starts shaping their mindset. Now, their mindset also, you see, the mindset is how the settled way of thinking that we have within us. So when it comes to teenagers, after the first initial programming, which is based on observation by what is exposed to on a repetitive basis, and what is based on experiences which are triggering high level of feelings and emotions in them, once they hit after the age of 7, the child now activates the logic mind. Now that is where the child starts taking instruction. Instead of, for example, using diapers, they can now start getting potty trained and all that. That is when the logic mind kicks in. Now, at that stage, it becomes one of the ways a child gets programmed at a teenage level is direct instruction. That is verbal programming. There's what you call verbal programming, there's visual programming. So these are the set of instructions that are coming to the child directly, whatever they are being experienced to. Also, there's people who are in a position of authority. That is the parent, the children, the parent and the teacher, or anyone who is in a position of authority to the child. Whatever is communicated verbally, it starts shaping their perspective and their mindset. Now, another way the child gets programmed at a teenage level is by environment in terms of their peers. The set of peers who are exposed to around them. Remember, the whole process of programming depends on repetition. I asked you a simple question, Brian. I think the last time we were together, I asked, why do they call it a television program?
You told me it's called that because it's programmed to run that way.
You see, the word program, it is something that becomes inculcated and integrated within a system based on continuous repetition and exposure. I gave you a very simple scenario. Most of the, if I was to use a very hilarious scenario, most of us men do not like soap operas. So you're coming into the house in the evening, yet we have our other halves, the people you're in relationship with most of the time. If you have someone around you who loves those soap operas or Nigerian movies, I'm just using this in a context. I'm not biased in any form. And then the first time, Brian, you come into the house, but every time you're coming into the house, there's someone watching that program. You don't want to watch it, but by default, you happen to be within the same vicinity. If there's volume, your brain will be one of the actors. True or false, Brian?
True.
And within repetitive exposure, you coming in at the same time, your brain will also start picking the plot here and there. After a period of time, you might find yourself coming in early so that you can follow up. Because that happened by, now you're the one asking what happened? What happened? Was that person killed? Did this happen? You see, that happens by default. So it is based on verbal exposure in terms of what you heard. It is based on visual exposure in terms of what is in front of you, that what you're seeing, and it is based on experiential exposure in terms of things that are triggering high level of feelings and emotions within you based on a set of information that is coming in. So a teenager is activated not only from the subconscious level, but the conscious now kicks in. They become highly hypersensitive to anything they hear, anything they see, and anyone they surround themselves with at their level on a repetitive basis. Keyword is repetition.
All right, Bob, that I think is good enough. I think Charity is happy. She's asking, how can we join the program? But before then, there's Firi who is asking, any views about exposing kids between the age of 0 to 18 to cell phones and TV? What's your opinion about that?
Now, I will explain something about that. You have to be very careful about the whole concept of repetition. Anything that is exposed to a system. Now I'll go back to the concept system. We all agree and have to accept, first of all, fundamentally we are systems. One of the rules about a system is it does not exist in a vacuum. A system must exist within an environment. Now, environment means what? It is the surrounding, the conditions, and the events in which this child is exposed to. It is the surroundings, meaning the physical objects. It is the set of events that are taking place around the child, and the general condition, the climate, how it triggers their feelings and that they're exposed to. That is the first rule of a system. It must be within an environment. But now the most important rule to answer that, a system assimilates to its environment. In other words, a system automatically, within the environment it is exposed to on a repetitive basis, it positions itself to become one with that environment. And that is why you find someone who was born, for example, in Africa, then they go and live in Europe for like 25 years, and when they come back, they have an accent. That accent is based on programming and assimilation of the system based on repetitive exposure to its environment. So why is this important? The concept of assimilation is this. Whatever your child is exposed to on a repetitive basis, they assimilate. Now, why does the system assimilate? The system assimilates because it wants to automate as many functions as possible within itself so that it can use predominantly majority of its energy focusing on what is the most important role of a system, which is to keep you alive, survival. You see, there is that concept of evolution. During the time when man was living without all this technology, homes and everything, when they were still living in the cave, the whole understanding is the brain had one function, which is called the reptilian function. The function of brain was one, to keep man alive, survival. Now, because of that constant exposure to animals around and danger from everywhere, the responsibility of the system was to look at how it can keep the child alive, or the person or the system alive. But as we evolved and became comfortable, that part of us which is meant to, part of us cognitively, the whole fundamental function of keeping us alive did not evolve. So how does that impact us? The brain wants to automate all the non-essential part of us that is energy just keeping us alive. So what is the danger in that? anything that is exposed to us on a repetitive basis, the brain automatically seeks ways on how to automate it. Now, how does it automate it? It automates it by forming habits within us. Now, how do these habits impact us in the future? You need to understand, by definition, a habit is when the body has learned how to do something better than the mind. It is when something has been automated in you in a way that the body understands how to do it better than the mind. So what happens when it comes to habits? The environment in which the system is operating in creates a trigger. That is an event. Now, the system has to respond. That is the second phase. The system has to respond to that trigger. And then the third part of that process, there'll be an outcome. So there's a trigger, there's a response, and there's an outcome. When this loop is closed, we call that the habit loop. So why do we have habits as human beings? We have habits because the brain wants to automate some of the things we do repetitively so that it can focus its energy on keeping you alive. But now these habits, where do they start? They start from an event. And then the choices we make in responding to that event, and then the outcome. So event, that is, there's the trigger, which is the event, the choice katikati, and then the outcome. So when you close that, you have a loop. You have a loop. I want to show you something. Anytime an event happens, if an event happens for the first time, the brain does not have an automated response within you. So the brain will come to you and ask you, how should we respond to this? So within that process, you have the power of choice. So you're going to make a choice. When you make a choice, there will be an outcome. So anytime you assign a choice to a new event, the outcome is enhanced after. There's an outcome that emanates. That is called the habit loop. So what happens? The moment you assign a choice, when that event comes the next time, in other words, the trigger comes the next time, the brain will not come and ask you, what should we do? It will ask you, should we do like what we did the last time? And at that stage, you still have the power of choice. But when this loop becomes repeated and repeated and repeated over a period of time, we lose the power of choice. So how do we lose the power of choice? Because the brain has understood, has picked on the repetition, and it has taken that and has automated that as a process within you, and it gets stored in your brain as what we call chunks. Chunks means what? It is a file that has been created in a cabinet in your brain on how to respond to a particular event or trigger as and when it shows up from the environment. So when that happens, when chunks are already in place, when the event or the trigger comes from the environment, the brain does not ask you, what do you do? It goes automatically and picks the automated stored behavior, which is in form of a habit. And it produces, it acts on that particular chunk. Whether the outcome is beneficial to you or limited, it does not discriminate. So the question is, when you are looking at the habits, the one most important thing you can do as a parent right now is to start shaping the type of habits your child has. Because these habits will be automated within them. By the time they become an adult, they are subconscious. And what does that mean? There are habits we pick as we are growing up that comes and that becomes the biggest limiting factors when we are adults. So for you to parent in the 21st century, it is even more difficult because there is exposure to information by the whole essence of technology. So if a child picks a habit of social media, and that habit repeats itself for the next 10 years, by the time that child becomes 30 years of age, he has a monster within him that is made. And that monster came in by 10 to 15 years of programming. And I told you anything that came out of repetition, it can only go out through what? Repetition. So how does the habit of social media influence the child? Number one, it becomes limitive in this context. It will kill his sense of discipline. It will kill his sense of work ethic. It will kill his sense of commitment in terms of goal setting. So automatically there are positive habits that will be limited within that particular system because they were not inculcated. You cannot have both positive and negative addressing at the same time. So what do you need to do as a parent? It is very simple. If you go right now and you do a very simple search and you look at a simple statement, what are the habits of the highly successful people? I'll tell you for a fact, number one, you will see they wake up early. Just go and try it. Or just click what are the successful habits of billionaires. Even right now, as we are having this session, you will see there's a consistency. Number one, they wake up early. Number two, they all read. Number three, they program and align their brain. They declutter. What does that mean? Most of them, they meditate in the morning. Number four, they all journal. They journal their ideas. They journal their life. They put it on a piece of paper. Number five, they all are goal-oriented. In other words, they will prioritize themselves on a particular set of outcomes they desire. It is consistent. So if you understand as a parent that you're having a young child and you're having this set of habits that the child can model after, that have guaranteed someone else success, why wouldn't you want to inculcate them at this age? And by inculcating them is repetitive. So I'll give you a very simple example. It is not, they are not inculcated authoritatively by verbal. Majority, the child becomes who they were exposed to. So who is the child exposed to for a long period of time? It is the parent and it is the teacher. But the parent has a very big role to play in influencing the child. I'll give you an example. There is John Maxwell. And if you've researched on his life, there is something he said which is very critical. He said, what made him who he is today? It is the fact that he had parents who paid him to read a book every week and teach them. These are parents who created an allowance. And he said the one book that influenced his mind is As a Man Thinketh. And he read that book when he was very young. And he said that book shaped his perspective of life to date. You see how it was done. Parents created a reward and incentive system. They took a particular habit they want to inculcate in the child, but they aligned it to something the child is emotionally triggered with. So in this case, he was triggered with making money in form of entrepreneurship, being entrepreneurial at an early age. So the parents telling him, listen, if you can read a book every week, and this book is able to explain to us some of the concepts, this is your allowance. In other words, they've created a reward system. And he said that is what shaped him, who he became today.
Bob.
So habits play a very, yes.
No, just continue, finish up on that. I want to say something. I like what you're saying.
Yes.
Just finish up on that.
Yes, habits cannot be imposed. Remember what I told you. Information plus emotion creates memory. So information, in other words, when you want to inculcate it, you are looking at how do you incentivize that habit to be part of the process. And habit is created through a process, not in form of an act. Through a process means what? As a parent to play a role because the child is learning experientially and modeling after the parent. So if you want the child to become a reader, are you a reader yourself? Or You create, for example, an extra 1 hour to sit in the study, all electronics off, and go over something, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be a technical book. But you see, by repetition, the child from observation, they start getting by default inculcated in the habit of reading. So from the most influential part, the most effective way on how a parent can influence a child's habit is experientially by them performing the same set of acts that will influence from observation. Yes, Brian.
Bob, I must admit that is very incisive. I mean, you've barely scratched the surface based on what the outline you had for this day, but I see time is well spent and we don't want to keep our parents here very late. But I appreciate their patience. They've been here. There's clearly a desire to learn more. And I'm glad, Bob, when we talked the day, that 2 weeks ago, when we said, let's start these programs, let's see what it can, how far it can go. Let's create a community of people we can work together through many things of life. I know you haven't even touched on my pet subject since you told me that word, metacognition, which we are supposed to talk about today. I don't know who knows what metacognition is here. Bob, when I sit with Bob, I come home and overload my wife with a lot of information. He told me metacognition is a science of thinking about what you're thinking. Thinking about what you're thinking is something we're supposed to talk about. Bob was going to ask you, what is the mindset of a strategist as a parent and what role does a parent play? I was going to ask you, how do you set the stage for successful parenting? I was going to ask you, what is the concept of programming in parenting? But then time is well spent. I don't want to keep our very patient parents for long. By a show of hands, how many would like us to be having this series? We are planning, we said, let's launch it today and see how it goes. You can raise your hand by show of hands so that we get a clearer picture. Great, Bob, everybody, I can see that hand, yes. There are those who want, maybe others are looking for how to raise the hand. Very good. So we shall be doing this. We shall get back to the drawing board with Bob. Bob runs a very, I don't know what to say. He runs many things. We partnered with Bob because of chess. And I told him we need to empower our chess parents through talking about their children, because the moment we have these children, the kind of habit we expose them repetitively through chess, we want them to have it in their mind. Then Bob told me we can co-create a curriculum, even talk about parenting, even talk about so many things that it blew my mind. And thank you, Bob, for being so receptive to this idea. Maybe you want to tell your parents briefly as we wrap up about the program that we plan to be running.
Yeah, actually this one, we created it as the 21st Century Parenting, and the program has 5 sections. There's the one which is parenting like a master strategist. The second section is programming the child for success. The third one is activating the leader within, that is helping the child to activate the leader within. And then the fourth section, which is productivity and performance management in a child. And the final section, which is, we call it learning for the future. Now, everything that we've discussed, we've just been scratching the surface, but it forms part of the program. For example, there's a whole section on habits. There's a whole section on mindset. There's a whole section on systems thinking. There's a whole section on strategy. Now we'll dive deep, not just from a descriptive perspective, but we look at how can we help, how can we prescribe it in a way that a parent can implement. So this is a novel program. We've created it based on, personally, I have a passion for what we call lifelong learning. And this is part of the skills of the future. There are those things that are not traditionally inculcated within the education system and frameworks that we've gone through, but now they form part of the world that we live in. So a modern parent must develop all this capacity. And the way the program is structured, it is not, remember there are 2 stakeholders here. There's the parent and then there's the child. So the program, like the way we are discussing it right now, is from the parent perspective. So the role of the parent is to not only gain the information, but the skill on how to implement that information. The primary responsibility of the child, of the parent on this information, is to reinforce the knowledge to the child. But at the same time, the program is customized to the actual. Now, what the child, all these are taught from a child's perspective, but at the same time, so the child is getting the skill and applying, the parent is reinforcing that skill. So this is a program that is coming into the market, and it has different forms. Like we are planning on having what we call blended learning model, which is asynchronized learning for parents who cannot attend in person. But at the same time, we have a live class which we are going to hold, I think, Brian, at Imara Ole Sereni?
At Imara Ole Sereni, yeah.
Yes, we are having a one-day full workshop, but at the same time, we are having the supportive process on how to implement. But within that workshop, we'll also activate the virtual option for those who are not there physically. So you will share with them the details once we finish after everything.
Thank you, Bob. I can't thank you enough. Well done. Congratulations. Hats off to you, Bob. And let's do this, man, for the sake of all of us. As we said, we are partnering through CHESS, and this has been indeed a pleasant experience. I'm sure as you go to sleep, we have some thoughts within us. We ignited some things I need to change. Bula said clearly she needs to reprogram herself, and I'm sure most of us will think of what to do next. Thank you very much. Unless there's any pressing thing that we need to say, I want to call this meeting to an end, and you can leave at your own pleasure. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Sophie. Sophie, I'll pick up with you on something. I told you we're doing this. So, Sophie, I look for you. Anna, thank you all the way from TZ. Thank you, Anna. It's a pleasure having you around. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Benjamin, for your kind thoughts. Thank you, Johnny. Thanks, Anthony. We shall break it down. All right, as the others leave, I'll remain with Johnny and Bob, I think. Well, Johnny has left already. Thank you. Holland, thank you very much. Carol Tuma, thank you very much for being in attendance, and we shall do more. Thanks, Coletta. Thank you. We shall be collaborating on this with you also. Well done. Thank you for just staying here.
Just a quick one.
Yep. Yes, Frida.
Is it possible for us to have another session?
Oh yeah, we
have more information.
Yes, we shall do that. We shall communicate. You have now become part of our community, so we shall communicate that effectively. Maybe you can drop your email address there, but we'll get to you. Whichever way I know we'll get to you.
Okay. Thank you. Good night.
Good night, Frida. Sophie, yes, Sophie, stay around kidogo. Sophie is saying, Brian should come to my school. Bob should come to my school. Not me. You have changed. Oh, Brian, I thought you said Brian and Bob. Okay. We shall plan to come to your school. Sophie has left. What about us from Uganda? Uganda can come to Kenya. Charity.
Sophie is here. Sophie is still here.
Sophie, don't go, don't go. Charity will pick up with you. Don't worry about that, okay? You'll be taken care of. All right, Charity, we'll take care of you. Okay, Carol, Tuma, you can leave at your own pleasure, not a pressure now. We want to wrap it up. I want to have a word with Bob and Sophie. Holland, have a good night. How is Gashi, Holland? Okay. All right. As they leave, I'll stop the recording.